Part 1, The Encounter. The night was colder than usual. The city streets were quiet, wrapped in fog and a thin layer of frost. Lamps flickered weakly, fighting against the darkness. Most people had already gone inside, hiding from the biting wind. Only one man walked alone down the street, his coat pulled tight around his shoulders. His name was Daniel. He had worked a long shift at the factory, and now he just wanted to reach home, warm his hands, and rest. As he passed a broken streetlight, he noticed something unusual. A small figure sat curled up against the wall. At first, Daniel thought it was just another beggar. The city was full of them these days, humans who had lost their homes after the wars. But as he moved closer, he slowed his steps. This was not a human. The figure raised her head. Her skin had a faint shimmer, almost silver under the weak light. Her eyes glowed softly like two pale moons. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hands shaking as she held a crumpled note. She could not have been more than a girl, maybe 16 or 17 in human years. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He had seen her kind before, aliens. They were called Lyrans. During the war, they were enemies. The government always said they were dangerous, clever, and not to be trusted. Even after the war ended, most humans avoided them. Some hated them openly. The girl looked at him with tired eyes. Her lips trembled as she spoke in a quiet voice, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "I only have $2, human. Please let me sleep in a warm bed." The words froze Daniel in place. She was begging him, a stranger, for shelter. He stared at the crumpled bill in her hand. $2 could not even buy bread in this city, let alone a room. She must have known that. For a moment neither of them moved. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. He wanted to look away, pretend he had seen nothing. It would be easier, safer. If anyone saw him standing here, talking to a Lyran girl, rumors would spread. People might think he was helping her. And helping an alien, especially one with no ID or papers, was dangerous. Still, something in her voice kept him standing there. It wasn't the words themselves, but the way she said them. There was no anger, no demand, only a quiet desperation. She wasn't trying to trick him. She was simply asking to survive one more night. Daniel glanced around the street. Empty. No witnesses. At least not yet. He took a careful step closer. "Where are you from?" he asked, his voice low. The girl lowered her head. "Far, too far to return." Her answer gave nothing away, and yet it felt heavy with secrets. Daniel frowned. He should walk away. That was the smart choice. But instead he crouched slightly so he could see her face more clearly. Her skin looked thin, fragile, almost glowing against the night. And her eyes, he could not ignore those eyes. They carried exhaustion, fear, but also something he couldn't quite name. "You can't stay out here," Daniel muttered half to himself. "It's below freezing." The girl nodded weakly but said nothing more. She seemed ready to accept whatever fate came to her, whether kindness or cruelty. Daniel ran a hand across his face. He thought about the stories. Some said Lyrans were killers who could not be trusted. Others said they were victims of war, just like humans. He remembered seeing one once on the battlefield, carrying another soldier to safety. The memory flickered in his mind, then faded. "Why me?" Daniel asked suddenly. "There are hundreds of people in this city. Why stop me?" Her glowing eyes lifted again, meeting his. For a moment the world around them seemed to vanish. The fog, the cold, the silence. All of it disappeared in that gaze. "Because you stopped walking," she whispered. The answer struck Daniel harder than he expected. He had paused. He had noticed. And that small act had made him different from all the others who had passed her by. Daniel stood up straight, his thoughts a storm inside his head. He could take her to the inn down the street. It was cheap, though not the cleanest. But if anyone saw him paying for her, there would be questions. Trouble might follow. He took a step back, ready to leave. The girl lowered her head again as if she had expected this all along. For a moment, Daniel thought she might cry, but no tears came. She simply sat there, silent, waiting for the cold to finish what hunger had started. The wind grew harsher. Daniel tightened his coat again, then cursed under his breath. His feet refused to move. He could not walk away, no matter how much his mind told him to. Something about her, her quiet strength, her fragile state, her glowing eyes, anchored him in place. Finally, with a deep sigh, Daniel spoke. "Come on, let's go." The girl lifted her head, her eyes wide with surprise. For the first time, her lips curved into the faintest smile. She rose slowly, as if her body had nearly forgotten how to move. Together, they walked into the night. The broken streetlight flickered once more, then went dark, leaving the empty corner behind. Daniel didn't know why he had made this choice. He didn't know what dangers it would bring. All he knew was that this night, under the cold fog, a stranger's quiet plea had changed everything. Part 2. The Dilemma. The inn was not far, but for Daniel the walk felt longer than ever. Every step his mind fought with itself. He told himself he should not be doing this. He told himself to turn back, leave her, forget he had ever seen her. But his feet kept moving forward. Beside him the alien girl walked in silence. Her steps were light, almost too light, as if her body was too weak to carry itself. She clutched the torn fabric of her coat close to her chest, though it did little to block the cold. The only sound between them was the crunch of boots on frost. Daniel kept his hands deep in his pockets, his jaw tight. His thoughts circled like hungry wolves. Why am I helping her? Why me? Why now? He remembered the posters plastered on city walls. Bold red letters, protect humanity, do not shelter the enemy. He remembered the guards at checkpoints searching for runaways, sometimes dragging them away in chains. He had never asked where those prisoners were taken. He had never wanted to know. Now he was walking with one of them. The girl glanced at him once, her glowing eyes soft in the night. It was not the sharp, dangerous look of a spy. It was the tired look of someone who had carried too much for too long. Still, Daniel did not trust it. Maybe that's the trick, he thought. Look weak, look harmless. Wait until a fool helps you, then strike. The inn came into view, a squat, crumbling building at the edge of the street. Its sign buzzed weakly, half the letters dark. The smell of cheap ale drifted from the door. Daniel hesitated at the corner. His stomach knotted. If he went inside with her, people would notice. People always noticed. The girl stopped too. She tilted her head slightly as if waiting for him to decide. You don't have to, she said softly. The words startled him. They were not bitter, not accusing, just simple. Daniel stared at her. What do you mean? Her gaze lowered to the frozen ground. You don't have to help me. You can leave me here. I won't blame you, he swallowed hard. Somehow that made it worse. If she had begged, clung to him, maybe he could have shaken her off. But her calm acceptance cut deeper than any desperate cry. For a moment, Daniel imagined walking away. He could turn back now. Pretend he had never stopped. Pretend he had never seen those glowing eyes. He could go home, warm himself by the heater and sleep peacefully, but he knew he wouldn't. He cursed under his breath and grabbed the door handle. The inn's heavy wooden door creaked as it swung open, letting out a wave of warm, stale air. Laughter and rough voices filled the hall. Daniel stepped inside and the girl followed quietly behind him. The innkeeper, a thick man with a greasy apron, looked up from behind the counter. His smile froze when he saw her. His eyes narrowed, then flicked back to Daniel. A room? The man asked, his voice flat. Daniel nodded. He pulled a few bills from his pocket and placed them on the counter. The innkeeper's gaze lingered on the girl. His lips curled slightly, not quite a smile, more a sneer. Your choice, he muttered, sliding a key across the counter. Daniel clenched his jaw but said nothing. He took the key and led the girl upstairs. The wooden steps creaked under their feet, each sound echoing like a warning. The room was small and plain, a narrow bed, a crooked chair, and a single cracked window. Still it was warm. The girl stepped inside and looked around as if she had entered a palace. Daniel set the key on the table. You can stay here tonight, he said, his tone clipped. But tomorrow you're on your own. The girl turned toward him. Her lips parted as if she wanted to thank him, but instead she only nodded. She moved slowly to the bed and sat down, her hands trembling slightly. Daniel lingered at the door. His chest felt heavy. He wanted to believe he had done enough, that leaving her here in this small room was where his responsibility ended. But his thoughts refused to rest. Why was she here alone in the city? Why had she chosen him out of everyone? And what danger followed her through the fog? He remembered the way she had whispered in her sleep downstairs, words she might not have meant to say. They are coming. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, his hand tightening into a fist. He didn't want to be involved. He had enough problems of his own. But deep down he already knew the truth. This was only the beginning. As he stepped back into the hallway, he realized his life had already shifted. Whatever fate had brought that girl into his path, it was not finished with him yet. And Daniel, no matter how hard he tried, was no longer the kind of man who could keep walking. Part 3. The Shelter. The inn grew quiet after midnight. The loud voices from downstairs faded, replaced by the dull hum of the old heater and the occasional groan of wooden beams. Daniel lay on the narrow bed in his own room, staring at the cracked ceiling. He had not touched the blanket. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw hers, those pale, glowing eyes that had followed him through the fog. The way she had whispered, "I only have $2, human," kept echoing in his head. It should have been easy to forget. People begged every day, but she was different. Daniel sat up and rubbed his face. He told himself he had done enough. He had given her warmth for the night. Tomorrow she would leave and he would return to his life. Yet the thought did not calm him. It only made the silence heavier. Across the hall in the other room she was alone. He wondered if she was sleeping or staring into the dark, just like him. He imagined her curled up on the bed, still shivering even in the heat. Something about that image tightened his chest. Finally, Daniel gave up on rest. He pulled on his boots and stepped quietly into the hall. The floorboards creaked under his weight, loud in the stillness. He hesitated at her door. His hand hovered over the handle before he knocked softly. There was no answer. He frowned and knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. Unease prickled at the back of his neck. He turned the handle. The door creaked open and the dim light from the hall spilled inside. The girl was there, sitting on the edge of the bed. She had not slept. Her hands rested on her knees, her head bowed slightly, her long silver hair falling around her face. She looked up slowly as the door opened, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Daniel froze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "You couldn't sleep either." It was not a question. Daniel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Too noisy downstairs," he muttered, though both of them knew it was a lie. The girl tilted her head, studying him with quiet curiosity. "Humans worry too much," she said softly. "You give kindness, but you do not trust it." Daniel frowned. "And what about your kind? Do you trust humans?" She lowered her gaze. "We had no choice but to learn." The room fell silent again. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His eyes searched her face. She was young, younger than most Lyrans he had seen. She didn't carry herself like a soldier or a spy, more like a child lost too far from home. Yet her silence carried weight, like someone who had already seen too much. "What were you whispering before?" Daniel asked suddenly. "When you were asleep. Something about, 'They are coming.'" Her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The glow in her eyes dimmed for a moment as if shadows had passed across them. "You heard that?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. She looked away, her voice dropping even lower. "They will find me. They always do." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. "Who?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment it seemed she would not answer. Then finally she whispered one word. "Hunters." Daniel's mind flashed back to the stories he had overheard in the factory. Rumors of Lyrans being chased down, captured, and never seen again. No one ever confirmed if it was the government, the black markets, or something worse. People called them cleaners or hunters, depending on which tale they believed. He swallowed hard. "If that's true, you shouldn't even be here. Staying in one place will only—" "I know," she interrupted softly. Her eyes lifted again, glowing with quiet defiance. "But I'm tired of running." Daniel had no reply. Her words hung heavy in the air, heavier than the walls of the small room. He wanted to tell her she was safe here, at least for the night, but the lie stuck in his throat. He could not promise safety, not in this city, not in this world. The girl drew her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them like a child hiding from the cold. She whispered again, almost to herself, "Just one night of warmth. That is all I asked for." Daniel looked at her and the battle inside him grew louder. He told himself again that he would walk away in the morning, that this was not his fight, that he was not foolish enough to protect someone being hunted, but the truth pressed against his chest like a weight. He already cared more than he wanted to admit. Outside, the wind howled against the window. Somewhere far in the distance, a siren wailed, fading slowly into the night. Daniel straightened and moved toward the door. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice firm but softer than before. "Tomorrow will be harder." The girl nodded but did not lie down. She only watched him as he left, her glowing eyes following him until the door closed again. Back in his own room, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his hands shaking slightly. He hated the feeling creeping over him, the feeling that his life was no longer his own. That by opening a single door on a freezing night he had stepped into something far larger than he understood. And deep down, he knew one thing for certain: she was right. Whoever those hunters were, they were coming. Part 4. The secret morning arrived slowly, painted in pale gray light that seeped through the cracked windows of the inn. The city outside was already stirring. Wagons rattled over the cobblestones, merchants called out to early buyers, and the smell of bread drifted faintly through the cold air. Daniel sat at the small wooden table in his room, his head in his hands. He had not slept much. His mind kept returning to the girl across the hall. Her voice, her glowing eyes, and that one word she had whispered, hunters. He told himself to leave, to pay for his room, walk away, and never look back. But something rooted him there, stronger than reason. He needed answers. When the hallway grew quiet, Daniel stood and crossed to her room. He knocked gently. This time her voice answered from inside. "Come in." He pushed the door open. She sat by the window, knees drawn to her chest, her silver hair catching the morning light. The blanket lay forgotten on the bed, as though warmth could not reach her no matter how close it was. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You said they're coming for you. Who are they?" Her eyes flicked toward him. They glowed softly in the daylight, but there was a weariness behind them, like she carried centuries instead of years. "You really want to know?" she asked. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." The girl was silent for a moment, her gaze returning to the street below. Children ran past, their laughter sharp in the air. A dog barked. Life went on as though nothing had changed. Finally, she spoke. "We were never meant to be enemies, humans and my kind. But when war came, sides were chosen, lies were told. And now," she trailed off, her voice cracking slightly. "Now some of us are not allowed to exist." Daniel frowned. "Not allowed to exist?" Her fingers dug into the fabric of her worn coat. "The hunters are not soldiers. They do not care about war or peace. They take those like me, the ones who escape camps, who hide among humans. They track us, capture us, erase us." Her words struck like cold steel. Daniel had heard rumors, but hearing them spoken with such quiet certainty made them real. "And why you?" he asked. "What makes you so special?" Her lips curved into a bitter smile. "Special? No, cursed maybe." She lowered her voice. "I know things. Things they want to bury." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Like what?" The girl finally turned back to him, meeting his gaze. For the first time, her glow seemed sharper, brighter. The war did not end because humans won. It ended because someone wanted it to end. A deal was made, one that cost my people everything. And if I speak of it, if I survive long enough to tell the truth, it could destroy those who made the deal. The words hung heavy in the air, heavier than the silence between them. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had lived through that war. He had believed the official story, victory, pride, sacrifice. Now this stranger claimed it was all a lie. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked, his voice sharp. The girl didn't flinch. She only whispered, "I don't expect you to believe. I only expect you to understand why I can never stop running." Daniel stared at her, his thoughts a storm. If she was telling the truth, she carried something dangerous, something that could shake more than just her world. But if she was lying, then he was already caught in a trap he couldn't see. He turned toward the door, his hand gripping the handle. "Whatever your secret is, it's not my fight. You wanted a warm bed. You got one. That's where it ends." The girl's voice followed him, soft but cutting. "If you walk away now, human, you will never know why your people keep living in fear. You will never know the price that was paid." Daniel froze. His knuckles whitened on the handle. He hated her words because part of him wanted to know, and wanting to know meant danger. Before he could answer, the sound of heavy boots echoed up the stairwell. Harsh voices barked orders downstairs. Daniel's blood ran cold. He didn't need to ask who it was. He already knew. The hunters had arrived. The girl's eyes widened, glowing brighter in sudden alarm. She stood, her frail frame trembling but steady. "They found me," she whispered. Daniel's heart pounded. This was the moment he had feared. The choice he had tried to avoid was now crashing through the walls of the inn. He could walk away, leave her to her fate, and stay safe. Or he could step into her nightmare and risk losing everything. The sound of boots grew louder, climbing the stairs. The girl looked at him, her voice barely more than a breath. "What will you do, human?" Daniel's hand slipped from the door handle. His throat tightened, and for a moment he hated himself for the answer already forming inside him. Because he knew he would not walk away. Not anymore. Part 5. The Chase. The sound of boots on the stairs grew louder, heavier, like drums of war beating closer with every second. Daniel's chest tightened. The girl stood frozen by the window, her glowing eyes fixed on him, waiting. He didn't know why he did it. Instinct, maybe. Or madness. But before the hunters reached the hallway, Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her toward the door on the far side, the one that led to the back stairs. "Move," he hissed. She stumbled after him, her breath sharp and uneven. The inn's floorboards groaned under their weight as they ran. Behind them, a door slammed open. Voices shouted, "They're here." One barked, "Don't let them escape." Another roared. Daniel shoved open the back stairwell door. The air smelled of damp wood and dust. He dragged her down the narrow steps 2 at a time. The hunters were quick, already pounding down the hall above them. At the bottom, Daniel burst through the rear door into a dark alley. The cold air hit his face like ice. Trash bins lined the walls and puddles shimmered under the weak glow of a flickering street lamp. "This way," he muttered, pulling her deeper into the shadows. The girl tried to keep pace, but Daniel could feel her slowing, her breath ragged. She was weaker than he expected. Each step seemed to cost her more than the last. He glanced back, frustration burning in his chest. "You have to keep moving," he said sharply. I'm trying," she whispered, her voice trembling. Shouts echoed behind them. The hunters had reached the alley. Daniel cursed under his breath. He pulled her into a side passage barely wide enough for 2 people. Their footsteps splashed through puddles, the walls closing in around them. A beam of light swept across the alley. Search lamps. The hunters were fanning out. Their heavy boots clanged against the wet stone as they spread through the maze of passages. Daniel stopped at a fork, his heart hammering. Left or right? Both looked the same, dark, narrow, endless. The girl tugged his sleeve weakly. "Right," she whispered. He didn't ask how she knew. He just trusted her and pulled her that way. They sprinted through the twisting alleys, their breaths harsh in the frozen night. The hunters followed, their shouts bouncing off the walls. "Block the exits. Don't let them get to the street." Daniel's mind raced. If the hunters trapped them in these alleys, they were finished. They needed to reach open ground, somewhere crowded, where the hunters wouldn't dare fire openly. At last, the narrow passage spilled out onto a wider street. Market stalls stood empty, abandoned for the season, their wooden frames covered in frost. Daniel and the girl darted between them, the crunch of boots echoing behind. The girl stumbled, nearly falling. Daniel caught her arm and pulled her upright. "Keep going," he growled. Her glowing eyes flicked up at him, filled with exhaustion and something else. Trust. They reached the far end of the market, just as more hunters appeared, blocking the street. Dark uniforms, heavy coats, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their eyes locked on Daniel and the girl. "Stop," one barked. Daniel's stomach dropped. They were surrounded. The girl's hand trembled in his grip. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought it was over. Then his eyes darted to the left, an old drainage tunnel half hidden behind a collapsed stall. "Down!" he shouted. He shoved the girl toward it and dropped to the ground, crawling into the tunnel just as bullets cracked through the air. Sparks burst from the stone behind him. The tunnel was low and damp, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. Water dripped from the ceiling. The girl coughed, her breath echoing in the tight space. Daniel pushed forward, his muscles burning. Shouts rang out behind them. The hunters were at the entrance, their lights cutting into the darkness. But the tunnel curved sharply, swallowing Daniel and the girl in shadow. They crawled until the tunnel opened into another alley. Daniel pulled her out, both of them gasping for breath. The city stretched before them, dark and endless, hiding 1,000 dangers. The girl collapsed against the wall, clutching her chest. Daniel crouched beside her, his own lungs on fire. He wanted to shout at her to ask why she was so weak, why she couldn't run faster. But when he saw her face, pale, shaking, her eyes glowing faintly, his anger faded. "They won't stop," she whispered. Daniel glanced back at the tunnel. She was right. The hunters would keep coming. They would never stop until she was theirs. He ran a hand through his hair, cursing under his breath. He should have left her in that room. He should have walked away when he had the chance. But it was too late now. He looked at her, shivering in the cold, her silver hair clinging to her face. She wasn't just another stranger anymore. She was his problem, his choice. "Get up," Daniel said firmly, pulling her to her feet. "We're not done yet." The girl leaned on him, her body trembling but her eyes steady. For the first time, Daniel saw a spark of fire in them, not just fear but defiance. The hunters' shouts echoed faintly in the distance. The chase was far from over, and Daniel knew that as long as he stayed with her, his life would never be the same again. Part 6. The Choice. The night air was sharp in Daniel's lungs. His legs ached from running, but he didn't slow. The girl leaned against him as they moved through the maze of streets, her steps unsteady, her breath shallow. Her silver hair clung to her damp face, and her glowing eyes flickered faintly, like lanterns struggling against the dark. Behind them, the hunters' voices carried through the alleys, closer than Daniel wanted to admit. They were trained, relentless, and armed. He had no plan, only instinct and the desperate urge to keep moving. At last he spotted an old warehouse at the edge of the district. Its windows were broken, its doors half hanging from rusted hinges. Daniel pulled the girl inside. Dust filled the air as he shoved the door closed behind them. The noise of the hunters grew distant for a moment. Inside, the warehouse was vast and empty, filled with shadows and broken machinery. The silence felt heavy, pressing against Daniel's ears. He guided the girl to a corner and helped her sit against the wall. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Her skin glistened with sweat despite the cold. Daniel crouched beside her, his voice tight. "You can't keep this up," he said. "They'll catch us if you can't run." She looked at him, her glowing eyes dim but steady. "Then leave me." Daniel shook his head, frustrated. "Don't say that. You don't understand," she whispered. "This isn't your fight. You didn't ask for this. If you leave me here, you can still go back to your life. Pretend none of this ever happened." Daniel stood and paced, his boots echoing in the empty space. Every word she spoke was true. He had no reason to stay. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who worked long hours in a factory, who wanted nothing more than quiet and peace. But her words didn't free him. They only bound him tighter. "Tell me the truth," Daniel said finally, his voice low. "Why are they hunting you? What are you carrying that's worth all this?" The girl's gaze lowered. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she whispered, "I saw what they did. I saw who made the deal to end the war. And I know what they're still doing, in the camps. If I can survive long enough to tell the world." Everything changes. Daniel froze. He felt his pulse in his throat. So it was true. She wasn't just some runaway alien girl. She carried knowledge that could tear open every lie the government had built since the war. "You could start another war," Daniel said quietly. Her eyes lifted to meet his. "Or end the fear forever." The sound of boots outside cut the moment short. Daniel swore under his breath. The hunters were spreading out, their shadows passing across the broken windows. Time was gone. The girl struggled to her feet, her body trembling. "Go," she said again, her voice firm this time. "They want me, not you. If you run now, you can escape." Daniel looked at her, his jaw clenched. For one heartbeat, he considered it. He could slip out the back, vanish into the night, and let her fate be hers alone. But then he saw her face, tired, pale, marked by fear and defiance all at once. He saw how young she truly was, how fragile and yet how much she carried. She was more than just a fugitive. She was hope wrapped in pain, and Daniel knew he could not leave. The warehouse doors burst open. Hunters stormed inside, their rifles raised, their voices sharp. "There!" one shouted, spotting them. The girl closed her eyes as if ready for the end. But Daniel stepped in front of her, his fists clenched. His body shook, but not from fear. "From choice. You'll have to go through me," he said. The hunters paused for a moment, surprised. Then one of them laughed. "A human protecting her? You'll regret this." They advanced, their boots striking the floor like thunder. Daniel's heart pounded, but he didn't move aside. He knew he couldn't fight all of them. Not with his bare hands, not with their weapons aimed at him. But he stood firm anyway, because sometimes choice mattered more than outcome. The girl's hand touched his arm. Her voice was soft, trembling, but steady. "You don't have to do this." Daniel glanced back at her. "Yes, I do." The hunters raised their rifles. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Daniel felt the weight of everything pressing down. The city, the war, the lies, the cold. And in that moment he realized something. He was no longer running from responsibility. He was standing in it. He didn't know if they would survive. He didn't know if the truth she carried would ever see daylight. But he knew this was the choice he had to make. Not for duty. Not for war. Not even for her glowing eyes, for himself. Because if he walked away now, he would never be human again. The hunters shouted, their weapons ready. The girl tightened her grip on his arm, and Daniel braced himself for whatever came next. Part 7. The Invitation. The hunters moved in, their rifles gleaming under the faint light seeping through the warehouse windows. Dust swirled in the air, every mote glowing like sparks before fire. Daniel stood tall in front of the girl, his fists clenched, his body trembling not from fear but from resolve. For a heartbeat, time stretched. He could hear his own breath, her quiet breathing behind him, and the low growl of boots scraping against concrete. Then the first hunter lunged. Daniel reacted without thinking. He grabbed a rusted iron pipe from the floor and swung. The metal cracked against the man's arm, knocking the rifle away. Pain shot through Daniel's muscles, but adrenaline drowned it out. He shoved the hunter back and turned, ready for the next. Bullets rang out, sharp and deafening. Sparks burst from the walls as rounds tore through rusted steel. Daniel pulled the girl down behind a pile of broken crates, his chest heaving. "They won't stop," she whispered, her glowing eyes wide with fear and guilt. "I know," Daniel muttered, pressing his back against the crate. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and bleeding from a cut across his cheek. But leaving wasn't an option anymore. The hunters spread across the floor, their voices hard and commanding. "Corner them, alive if possible. Kill him if you have to." Daniel clenched his teeth. He had been a soldier once. He had heard those same orders before, but never aimed at him. Now he was the enemy. The girl touched his shoulder. "You can still go. They'll let you live if you leave me." Daniel turned to her, his eyes burning. "Stop saying that. You think I dragged you this far just to throw you away now?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She saw something in his face, something unshakable. The hunters closed in, their boots thundering on the floor. Daniel grabbed her hand. "Run," he said. They bolted toward the far end of the warehouse, weaving through broken machines and shattered beams. Bullets cracked behind them, fragments of stone and metal spraying the air. Daniel felt the girl stumble, but he pulled her forward. Refusing to let go, a side door loomed ahead, half broken, light spilling through its cracks. Salvation. But as they reached it, two hunters stepped into their path. Rifles raised, Daniel skidded to a halt, his chest burning. He had no weapon, no plan, just instinct. He shoved the girl behind him. "Stay down." The hunters aimed, and then silence. The air grew heavy, strange. Daniel glanced back at the girl. Her glowing eyes had changed. No longer dim, no longer trembling. They burned, fierce and bright like twin stars. Her body shook, not from weakness, but from something awakening deep inside. The hunters hesitated, uncertain. Their grips faltered. The girl whispered something in her own tongue, soft and sharp, and suddenly the light from her eyes flared. It wasn't fire. It wasn't heat. But it was power, ancient and untamed, filling the air with a pulse that rattled the walls. The hunters staggered back, shielding their faces. Their rifles clattered to the ground. Daniel stared in shock. He had thought she was fragile, broken, helpless. But in that moment she was something else. Something the hunters had every reason to fear. Her light dimmed again as quickly as it had risen. She collapsed against Daniel's chest, weak and trembling once more. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Stronger. With more." Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her steady. "Then let them." "I won't let them take you." She looked up at him, her eyes soft now, the glow fading to a gentle shimmer. For the first time since he had met her, she smiled. A real smile, fragile but warm. "You don't even know me," she said. Daniel shook his head. "I don't need to. I just know I'm not leaving you." Her eyes filled with something that looked like relief. She leaned against him, her breath slow and even. Together they pushed through the side door into the night. The cold air wrapped around them, sharp but alive. The city stretched out before them, filled with shadows and dangers, but also hidden paths and promises. Daniel looked at her, the weight of his choice heavy, but clear. "You can stay with me," he said. His voice was rough but steady. "My home is small, but it's safe. It's yours if you want it." Her lips trembled. She had asked for nothing more than a bed, one night of warmth. Now here was an invitation she had never dreamed of. She whispered, her voice barely more than breath. "Thank you, human." Daniel nodded. "No, not human, Daniel." She blinked, then whispered back, "Lyra." Her name hung in the air, fragile and precious. For the first time, Daniel felt the world shift around them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something larger, trust, truth, and the bond they had forged in a single night of running. As they disappeared into the foggy streets, Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. The hunters would return. The war might never truly end. But he wasn't afraid anymore, because he had made his choice, and in the silence of the night her voice lingered in his ear. "You saved me, Daniel. Now when the time comes, I will save you."